Welcome to Forest Outdoor Adventure. We've got something very exciting planned today. If you're new here, welcome. My name is Forrest. I'm a bike shop manager and mechanic. And if you're a returning viewer, welcome back. It's glad to have you. So we've been getting a lot of comments on this channel recently, folks asking how to change a rear e-bike flat tire. So I figured why not make a video about it. I'll take this opportunity and show you guys how to change every kind of bike flat that at least I can think of. And we've actually got a couple flat tires here in the shop today, so let's get to it. So we've got a pretty cool display of parts here. Somebody actually had me order these Surly tires for them. They're going to go on a tubeless with these muck-off valve cores. So to start, we're actually going to be working on some mountain bike tires. These are going to be a tubeless setup. These are actually a 27.5-inch plus size tire. They're actually a 2.8, very wide. And again, we're going to set these up tubeless with these muck-off valve stems that I have here. And then after that, we're going to move on to these Continental Grand Prix tires. These are going to be tubeless as well, a little bit different of a process doing a road tire. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started on the mountain bike tires. So we're going to go ahead and start with these mountain tires. These tires are actually already taped tubeless ready, so we're just going to pop the tires on, add the sealant, and air them up. These Surly tires are actually pretty sweet. They come with this little wrapping around the edge here. We're going to go ahead and peel that off and get these guys all undone. And they unfold just like this. As you guys can see, these are a 2.8, so they're actually super wide. And in order for a tire to be tubeless, they do have to say tubeless ready, or at least somewhere on the box be a tubeless rated tire. I think what we're going to do first, we're going to run our fingers all the way around this tire, and we're going to start snapping the bead off. So let's get right to that. When you go to switch a tubeless tire, you want to be kind of careful when you break the bead off like this to not damage the rim tape, because if the tape gets damaged, you'll get tire sealant coming back through your spoke holes right there. This one's actually got an inner tube in it right at the moment, which makes me question the integrity of the rim tape, which is something you're going to want to check before you put the new tire on, of course. And set that tube to the side. This tire is really loose, so you can just go ahead and peel it off. I have to get under it like this. And it just falls right off. So when you're checking the rim tape, you want to make sure there's no really big air bubbles. As you guys can see, this rim is really wide. It's like 35 millimeters wide or maybe more. And I'm not seeing any major air bubbles or anything, which is really good. I'm actually going to go ahead and get the front wheel disassembled right now as well. This has got an inner tube in it, I believe. This tire's giving me a heck of a time. There we go, folks. So once we got the one side all the way busted off, I moved to the other side, got it about halfway busted off, and it's finally starting to lose its vacuum seal to the rim. It's finally starting to allow me to break it off the feet of the wheel here. Then we can go ahead and take our tire lever, and if you don't have tire levers for any of these repairs, I would recommend buying a set of tire levers. We're going to take that hook on the lever, get right here underneath the bead of the tire, and peel it up on the outside. Plastic tire levers definitely recommended. With the metal ones, you're going to risk nicking up your wheel. You can get up under here like that, and we're going to peel back. And just like that, got the one side off. There goes your inner tube. Get it peeled off the back side here. Voila. Again, if the tape is peeling back or anything funky going on, or even here at the valve hole, this all looks pretty decent. I think it'll hold air. You can just go around like this, pinch the whole tire around, get it nice and round, ready to roll. So pro tip, another thing you can do, especially with mountain bike tires or really any tire, you can align the wording on the tire with the valve stem hole. If you have a black valve stem, sometimes they're tricky to find with the pump, and it'll be a lot faster. You just look for the wording on the tire. I like to make sure the tire is nice and expanded, nice and round. I set it on the ground like this, and then I start with the bottom of the rim, put the rim in there, and I kind of start working the tire onto the rim. Okay, so you've made it to this point. You have half the tire on the wheel, and you've started to get the second side seated. You're sure the direction is proper. As you can see, disc brake is on the left side, tire is going to be rotating that way, so we're all good. You have a choice to make at this point. You can either air the tire up without sealant in there, or you can chance it, dump the 4 ounces of sealant in the tire and air it up. I think in this case, I don't really want to waste any sealant, so I'm going to try to air this thing up without putting any sealant in there first, and then we'll let the air out if it looks like it's going to hold. I don't hear any excessive leaks, and we'll put the sealant in there and it'll be good to go. Sorry for all the stationary camera angles, folks, but basically what we're going to do here, when you guys get to this point and the tire is just about crossed right here, what the tire is asking you to do is actually pinch together the bottom edge here, and if you pinch these together, bring it closer on the bead, you're going to actually gain more tire that you can push on here each time. And I promise you guys, on 90% of tires, if you go around the bottom here and you continue pinching and you pinch those sidewalls together over and over, eventually this will just let you slip it on by hand. But if they're really tight, and some tires are just stubborn like that, you can go after it with the tire lever. With the tubeless tire though, you want to be really careful that when you get that lever underneath the bead like that and you push up, that you don't score the rim tape with the edge of the lever. So especially with metal levers, you want to be careful. You can also nick the tape with a plastic lever too. What I recommend, when you push up, don't go all the way over the top of the tire wall. You want to make sure you only go about halfway each time, so as to not let that sharp edge of the tire lever bite into the rim tape. I'm going to see how far I can get this by hand. If I need the tire levers, we'll follow up with you guys. Okay, so as you can see there, it wasn't all that hard. It was about as hard to take off as it was to put back on. We're going to go ahead and hit this with the air, see if it snaps on the bead. If it does, I'll go ahead and do the other one, and then we will add the sealant, and he'll be all set. That was scary. So, that was super terrifying, but what we can see is the tires actually snapped on the bead. I can't really hear anymore, but we can go ahead and take this valve core out now. I don't think there's any chance of this thing actually falling back off the bead, and we're going to put some sealant in there. I think a tire like this is going to require probably about 4 ounces in each tire, and we'll get it going. Okay, time for tire number 2. And we'll let the air out and we'll add the sealant. And in case you guys are wondering, that's 4 ounces of orange seal tire sealant, and I like to use that as a good starting point for really any mountain bike tire. Once you get them seated, hopefully you don't hear any air leaking. You can take them and shake them however you'd like. The best thing to do with a tubeless tire is get out and take it for a ride. Sometimes they take a couple rides to fully seal. But without further ado, let's go ahead and move on to the next thing. Alright guys, so now it's time to take on something a little bit more challenging, and that's going to be road tubeless. Let's get into it. So as you guys can see right here, we've got these DB38 road wheels. This has still got the cassette and the disc brake rotor on it. There is a broken spoke on this wheel, so I'm going to have to replace that before we can go ahead and actually tape the rim and put the tires on it. But essentially the process here is about the same, just a little bit trickier because it is a lot skinnier of a wheel. Getting a rim tape to seat in here can be tricky sometimes. We are in luck. This is a carbon wheel, so it is a little bit of a more etched surface, so the tape does stick a little bit better. I have a couple tips I'll show you guys along the way to make this easier, but before we get into that, I've got to get the spoke replaced. So let's go. So right now I'm going to start by putting my spline tool over the disc brake rotor. This is a center locking rotor. And get it over that center locking rotor. Turning to the left, and as you can see, the rotor spins right off. And then we're going to go ahead and do the same thing with the cassette. We're going to use our cassette pliers. This is one of my favorite tools here in the bike shop. Alright, I've got plenty of videos about how to tape road bike wheels, and as you guys can see, I've got this one all taken care of. I did get the spoke replaced as well. So we're now on to wheel number 2, and this is where the techniques start coming into play. What you're going to do first is you're going to go ahead and throw your rim tape you're going to use in the microwave for about 15 seconds. I wouldn't do much more than that, or it could melt on you. So 15 seconds makes it just pliable enough to wrap around the wheel. All right, so with that wheel all taped up, let's go ahead and put the tires on. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we've got both of the wheels all set for the guy. Got them up to pressure and they are holding good. So I'm stoked on that. This next project is what you guys clicked on the video for, and that is a fat tire e-bike flat. So check this out. This is not actually flat, but the wheel has to get removed in order for me to replace the cassette, because the gentleman's actually got skipping teeth on the cassette. So we're gonna go ahead and check the chain and then spin this cassette off with the cassette tool. And at the same time, I'm going to show you guys how to take the wheel off of a fat tire e-bike like this. And if you can see, you carefully spin it this direction, the tire itself is actually protruding out of the wheel already. So we're going to have to air this down, mess with the tire a little bit, and get it going. We are deep in projects today. Let me show you what the first step is. So I realized on some of my other e-bike videos, I was saying you needed wire cutters in order to take the rear hub motor off, and what I meant by that was you actually need wire cutters to take the zip ties off that hold the motor wire on to the frame. Basically, if you were to get a flat on one of these bikes and you were out in the field, it would be pretty tricky to take those zip ties off unless you had wire cutters if you were going to replace the tire or tube on like the side of the road. When we're here in the shop, we just cut the zip ties off, put new ones on when we're done, everything's good to go. But if you were out in the field, that's the first step you want to do, and that's the first step where things could go awry for you if you didn't have those. Disclaimer, the wire cutters are not for cutting the motor wire that goes to the rear hub motor. A bunch of people were commenting thinking that's what I meant. I have logic, that's definitely not what I meant. They're just for the zip ties. Being very careful not to cut the motor wire. These are usually like a big 9-prong. They're fairly standard, and they're either on the right or left chainstay of your e-bike on 99% of rear hub motor e-bikes. So the next step that you're going to do is you're going to grab yourself a 4mm Allen wrench, and if it has one of these derailleur guards on here, which is usually a good sign, we're going to break this derailleur guard free and remove it. Shift the bike all the way into the smallest ring here in the back, and we're going to do that by hitting the plus button multiple times, and you're going to pedal the bike forward, being careful not to get any of these wires stuck in the rear wheel. Hit the brake. Now that the chain is there, this wheel is going to come off and on 10 times easier. Go ahead and slide this cover off in order to access that nut behind there. This is an exposed wire on the bottom here on 99% of electric bikes, so just be really careful this doesn't bend down like that in order not to nick it. But if you're able to get to this point, you're going to be good. In my case, I'm actually going to take this all the way off because I'm going to have to get this cassette off. Okay, the next key factor here, and this is an important one to remember, these axles are actually a slotted axle, so they're flat on two sides. Now, where that comes into play is when we put this wheel off and on, this thing can only fit in here with the two flat edges on each side. If this axle rotates and spins where the two round edges are on the front and the back, it's not going to have enough room to actually slide in. And more often than not, I see these get jammed up because of the motor torque, where the axle will actually spin if these nuts come loose, and it makes the wheel jammed up. So there's a fix for that. If in the event you go to take your rear wheel off and you spin those nuts loose and the axle does not just fall out of the frame, because 99% of them do not, they're going to be rotated a little, you're going to grab yourself a crescent wrench just like this one, and you're going to put it like so on each side of that axle. And once you spin these nuts loose, you're going to be able to wiggle that crescent wrench back and forth while holding the tire, and the whole thing is going to fall out so much easier. That's a lot better than sitting there banging on the tire as it's bouncing up and down until it eventually falls out and you broke something, when all you have to do is just wiggle that axle and it. So the next tool you're going to want to put in your toolkit is more than likely going to be an 18 or a 19mm box end wrench. And we're going to use that 18 in order to get to those nuts on this side and the adjacent side. And what we're going to actually do with the one on this side is I'm going to hold the wheel and we're actually going to spin it all the way off. And in my case, I have to pull the nut all the way off of the wire because, again, we're going to be removing the freewheel. But in your case, if you're just going to do the flat, you're just going to remove the nut and it's going to sit right here up against the plug. And she hasn't decided to fall out yet. There's a little bit of space in between there now. We've actually got another washer here that goes behind that nut. I'm going to slip that all the way off, put it over there on my table. And the next thing we're going to want to do is do the same thing to this side. Like I said, if the wheel doesn't drop right out, you're going to hold the top of the rim like that while you wiggle back and forth with the crescent wrench. It'll fall out at that point. Another easy tip you can do, take the derailleur and pull it down so it sits at a vertical angle like that. That'll help that cassette fall straight down rather than having to wiggle around a bunch of stuff. All right, folks, we've had success. As you guys can see, I got the wheel removed here. Your next step you're going to want to do with this wheel is take note of the orientation that your washers are in. Ignore my gloves, that's hilarious. If you guys can see, these washers actually have a groove in the bottom. We can see down there. That washer's actually got a groove, and that groove right here is the down position of the washer. Those washers never really go facing the other way. So if you go to put the wheel back on the bike, you want to make sure that the washers are rotated down. And the washers can only really go one way in the correct position. If you don't orientate them right, the brake will not line up properly if it's a disc brake, and it just won't tighten down straight. Your shifting will be off. So you really want to make sure the washers go back the same way. And folks, if you're ever curious on how to remove a freewheel off of one of these fat tire e-bike wheels, I'll show you how to do that as well. So you're going to get yourself a freewheel tool, just like that one. You're going to clamp it right here in the vise. You want to make sure that that freewheel tool has a big enough hole down the center so we can slide the wire through. Alright, so this is a pretty cool setup. So basically what we have going on here is our freewheel tool is underneath the freewheel, and you got your wheel like this. Now, the wheel can't free spool either direction. We're going to go ahead and use our hands and rotate this counterclockwise, and it's going to bust that freewheel off of there. So now that that freewheel's been removed, we're going to go ahead and reverse the process and get the new one installed. All right, I got sidetracked for a couple hours here in the bike shop with a few other projects, but we are back on the electric bike, and this is where we're at. I got the freewheel put on here, got it all tightened down, and we're about to put the tire back on. Now, I should mention, if you do have tube patches, that could be a good way to do this without taking the whole tire off, because theoretically, you, with the wheel on the bike, can actually peel the sidewall off the wheel, pull the inner tube out of the wheel, find where the hole is, patch it, put it back in. In my opinion, it's faster and easier to pull the entire wheel off. Some people don't feel that way, but it's up to you to make your own decisions. Also, patches are a little bit cheaper than a whole tube. In this case, it's flat, and we're here in the bike shop. We have extra tubes, so we're gonna go ahead and put a brand new tube in there. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna come down here, and we're going to locate that valve stem hole. Then we're going to grab the tire and make sure we have the correct orientation. So as you can see, we've got a standard fat tire e-bike 26 by 4 inch tire. It's got the letters printed right there, and you guys know I like to align the letters with the valve stem hole. So we're going to go ahead and get half of the tire on the bead, just as we did with the other ones. I like to go ahead and add just a little bit of air to the inner tube. It makes it a lot harder to actually pinch the tube if you're going to be putting it in, especially with tire levers. In a fat tire e-bike, it doesn't really have to be aired up, but a little air doesn't hurt. Okay, so personally, once I've made it to this point, I like to go ahead and lay the tire down horizontally on something like a bench, or if you're on the side of the road, just lay it down on the ground. What we're going to do at this point is we're actually going to start feeding the tire inside of the rim, making sure that once it's fed in there, there's no twists or anything weird going on, so when we air it up, it all airs up nice and even. So once the tire is fully aired up, I like to grab it like this and sit on top of these things. With a big fat tire, they're really hard to get centered properly, so once you get it up to about 20 psi, 18 to 20 psi, stick it like this down on the ground and just go ahead and push down on all sides. And that's just going to guarantee that the tire is nice and centered on the wheel. I see too many times they go flat because these big tubes protrude out the side of the tire, and you'll have a blowout while you're riding, or it'll seem uneven if the bead isn't set all the way on the tire properly. So just make sure everything's even and you're aired up to the proper pressure. For these guys in particular, it recommends max of 28 psi. So we're not really going to go past 28. Even 20 feels really hard in a fat tire bike like this. So we're going to go between 20 and 28 and call it good. Alrighty, so with everything seated properly, the bike shifted into its hardest gear, and all of our washers and of sorts back on the bike there, we're going to go ahead and put the wheel back in. I'm going to show you guys the easiest process that I know. Fat tire e-bike still is going to be one of the hardest things to put a wheel on, especially if you've never done it before. But hopefully I can provide some insight in order to make it quick and easy, and you guys will have your tire replaced in no time. Okay, so number one, I like to make sure my slotted axle is facing front to back. If we remember, that's how we pulled it out. The next thing I like to do, push that derailleur back to where we had it before in the vertical position and pull back on it. Our next thing here, we've got a wire that's in the end of our motor here. We want to make sure that's well out of the way. If you can, remember what gear you were in when you pulled it off the chain. That helps a lot. And we just got to start going up while maintaining vertical position of the axle. So right here is where a lot of people get stuck, and two things happen. Either they can't put the wheel all the way back in the frame, centered up properly, or that axle will roll on them. And what we're going to do is, to mitigate that, is we're going to make sure we have our washers fully bottomed out on the inside of that wheel, on the inside of the frame. We're going to get it as close as we can here, making sure the axle is still fully straight. And then we're going to eye up our disc brake on the left hand side, and we're going to slip it right in there. I'm going to go ahead and get the non-drive side locked down. So as you guys can see, I use my 18mm wrench on the non-drive side. That's the only nut holding this wheel on at the moment, but it can actually hang right here, and that's going to allow us to get this side nice and centered up and make sure it's fully bottomed out in the frame. Now as you guys can see, if you look deep down in there, we're not fully centered up. We need to pull the wheel up just a little bit, and I'll probably have to put some pressure on it while locking this nut down. I'm going to grab my box end wrench here. I'm going to get the nut as close as I can to the frame, and then I'm going to put some pressure on it. Pressure going up, that is. And as far as torque specs for this stuff goes, make it tight. The looser it is, the axle will rotate. You want to make sure that it's good and torqued, because that's a lot of torque going through that motor. So you want to make sure nothing rolls. So then the next thing we'll do, we're going to reverse engineer. We've got this little plastic cover. We want to make sure that wire is facing in the down position. Sometimes I have folks that leave them facing forward like that, and it really puts a cut into that wire. And that's the one flaw with these rear hub motors I wish they would fix. But now we're going to go ahead and get the motor plugged back in, and we're going to do our 2 zip ties. And then my favorite tool, the wire cutters for the zip ties. We're going to reinstall the derailleur guide here with our handy dandy 4mm Allen wrench. And this thing is fully ready to hit the road. The one thing I will say, going into this project, you are probably going to want to have a little bit of knowledge about how a disc brake works, if your bike has disc brakes, mechanical or even hydraulic, and a good understanding of how the derailleur works, because if any of this gets jumbled up while you have the wheel off, you're going to want to know how to go back and take a look at that. And that brings me to my next point. If you do want to learn how to adjust anything, I'll leave a link to a video up at the top of the screen where we run through all of that stuff and a little bit more. If you guys enjoyed this type of content, please consider subscribing to my channel, give me a like, and check out some of my other videos. I have a ton of bike related content, and we will catch you guys on the next one. Thanks for watching.